Bit of an odd slate for tonight in daily fantasy baseball with a lot of good pitchers on this 8-game slate, but several of them are in very weird spots where they're kind of in repeat matchups, facing tougher teams, or doing something that kind of clouds their outlook a bit. Maybe just in really bad form right now. So it does complicate things a bit for us trying to identify which guys we want to build around. I do think there are guys who check enough key boxes to be quality daily fantasy plays, but definitely some question as to the viability of them and how certain we should feel in those guys. We'll break down who those guys are, why things could potentially go awry, why I still like them, and much more to get you ready for Monday night in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Monday night's 8-game main slate with locks up for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for today. The big weather note on this slate is that there is a chance of rain tonight in Minneapolis for the Twins and Mariners. I would bet they get most of that game in, but there is some risk toward the end of that night where potentially it's a delay, a suspension, stuff like that. So I would check back on the timeline of the weather in Minneapolis later on to make sure you are good to go with Luis Castillo and Kenta Maeda in that game. We'll talk about one of those guys later on and get you ready for the pitching preview here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We're here every weekday talking MLB. We got some PGA on Tuesdays, USC on select events on Fridays as well, all right here in the same place. And of course, the solo shot does go up as well over on the FanDuel YouTube page and on FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices as well. The U.S. women's soccer team is taking on the world, and you can take home bonus bets every time they win with FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $100 in bonus bets guaranteed, plus another $10 in bonus bets for every Team USA win. Sign up between now and August 3rd, so this is still going despite the fact they have played their first game. Then place your first $5 bet to unlock your bonus bets. That way, you'll be all set to bet on everything from total goals to player props all tournament long. However you want to play, don't miss your chance to get $10 in bonus bets for every Team USA win, plus $100 in bonus bets guaranteed. Make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 or in Kansas, ksgamblinghealth.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Maryland, mdgamblinghealth.org. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Monday main slate, Luis Castillo comes in with the highest salary on FanDuel. His salary is $10,800. Yu Darvish, $10,000, followed by Jose Barrios at $98,000. We got Logan Allen at $94,000 with John Gray, Brandon Bielak, Kenta Maeda, and Graham Ashcraft as the others at $8,000 or higher. On this slate, we do have a pair of high strikeout guys facing each other in Minneapolis. That's Luis Castillo taking on Kenta Maeda. The problem is they're facing two decent offenses, and those two pitchers just saw the same opposing teams last week. So familiarity is about as high as it can get. So I think I'm going to put Yu Darvish as my top pitcher of the night at $10,000. Darvish is at home against the Pirates, which is a pretty neutral matchup. They've got a 98 WRC plus against righties with a 23% strikeout rate. They're basically league average in both those categories. So it's not about the matchup. I just like Darvish himself. He's always experimenting. He's got like 40 different pitches, so his pitch mix is always changing. Most recently, Darvish has been throwing more curveballs. It's an 8-start sample, and the results have been mixed, but he is getting some strikeouts. He's hit 9 strikeouts twice, and he had 9 or 7 last time out. That's while making only 3 of his 8 starts at home. He is at home this time around, and Darvish's strikeout rate is 4 percentage points higher at home this year than it is on the road. So I've got Darvish projected for 6.2 strikeouts tonight. That's not a huge number by any means, but it is enough to make him a quality play on this slate where there are so many guys in somewhat dicey situations. So to me, Yu Darvish does belong at the top of our list for today, despite the fact it's not a great matchup and despite the fact that Darvish not exactly in his highest strikeout form as of right now. Number 2 is Logan Allen. He's facing the Royals tonight, and he's also imperfect, but it's a really good matchup, and Allen is at home, and I think we can give him a swing here. The matchup is a big part of this because the Royals are an advantageous matchup for lefties with a 93 WRC plus and a 143 ISO. They also strike out a lot with a 25% strikeout rate, but their walk rate is low at 7%. Which means that the Royals average few pitches per plate appearance relative to their high strikeout rate. So even though they strike out a lot, you're not wasting a lot of pitches against them. That's good for Allen because he's had big issues with pitch efficiency at times this year. He faced the Royals back on June 28th. He threw 98 pitches and lasted just 3 2/3 innings. And he got demoted after that because they kept burning the bullpen after Allen went out because he was super inefficient. They have been keeping his stints kind of short this year, but he did throw 132 2/3 innings last year. He's at 87 so far this year. So I don't think it's a situation where they're scaling back his innings for that reason. It just seems like he's not efficient. And he may get better in that regard because of the matchup, despite what happened back on June 28th. And Allen does have upside. He's had 8 strikeouts. He had 8 strikeouts last time out in a 5-inning shutout appearance. He had 10 strikeouts in late May. So I think Allen can put up a big score on FanDuel. And his salary is $9,400. So to me, Allen does enough to be a quality play for tonight. I'd put him behind Darvish for sure, but I do think he belongs as the second stud. For tonight, we'll talk about Luis Castillo and things to watch. Among the value plays, I do feel best about Kenta Maeda. I thought pretty long and hard about making a case for John Gray, but with the Astros getting Yordan Alvarez back tonight and Gray kind of in a very weird slump, it's a rougher situation. So I do want to go towards Maeda, despite the fact he's had some weird matchups too, or weird starts, and it is a repeat matchup, as mentioned, with the Mariners. But Maeda has tremendous underlying numbers since coming off the IL. He's made 5 starts, and in that time, he has a 3.11 skill interactive ERA with a 35% strikeout rate. And that strikeout rate actually went up last time out because he had 9 strikeouts in 6 1/3 innings against these very same Mariners. And honestly, given their situation, that makes a lot of sense. They have a 25% strikeout rate against righties across the full season. It is worth noting that Maeda did that on just 80 pitches. So it wasn't like the Twins suddenly gave him a longer leash. Maeda was just very efficient. Now he does have to face them again, but he's at home this time. His swinging strike rate there was 17.5%, and it's 16.3% in the 5 starts since he's come back. The batted ball data for Maeda is not great, which is why he can have some weird starts. But, and you add that into the repeat matchup, and the pitch count, that's why I'm not higher on Maeda. But I think he can do a lot worse than him for $8,400. Again, Allen has his flaws. Darvish is not perfect either. So I see no reason to exclude Kenta Maeda from your player pool for tonight. I've got Maeda projected for 20.9 plate appearances. Allen projected for 22.5, so not a huge gap between those two guys. And I do have Maeda with a higher strikeout projection. So probably would go Maeda above Allen overall tonight after considering salary, but everyone on this slate is kind of flawed. So keep that in mind. If you find someone you think is better than them, I'm probably not going to talk you out of them. We'll talk about Luis Castillo and things to watch too. So a lot of different ways you can play things at pitcher for tonight, but I'll go with Darvish 1, Maeda 2, Logan Allen 3 after considering salary. Let's dig now into the stacks. Adam Wainwright coming off the injured list tonight, and he's expected to go around 65 pitches. So it'll be Wainwright plus the Cardinals bullpen. But I think that combo is a good reason to stack the Diamondbacks tonight. The roof will be closed in Arizona, which means it's not as good of a park as usual because it is a cooler temperature then, but the matchup does make up for it. Wainwright really struggling before he went on the IL. He made 11 starts and he had a 7.66 ERA. His expected ERA is somehow actually worse than that at 8.22, because he's not getting any strikeouts. His batted ball data, much worse than it was last year. His barrel rate this year is 11.7%, and it was 6.5% last year. So the hope, as someone who's watched Adam Wainwright his entire life, basically, is that he'll turn it around. Maybe the IL stint can fix that for Wainwright. It's hard to see that, though. And the Cardinals' bullpen is average behind him. They're facing a really solid Arizona offense with a 109 WRC plus against righties in the current active roster. So I think the Diamondbacks grade out really well here and will be my top stack of the night, even with the roof being closed in Arizona. I specifically love Geraldo Perdomo in these stacks where he's batting leadoff against righties. He's got a 146 ISO, which is fine, but he runs a lot. It's a similar thought process for Jake McCarthy, where he's not going to hit for a ton of power, but for him, batting sixth, that's a spot where you can steal. Perdomo batting leadoff, you can steal. And both these guys, Perdomo and McCarthy, can have big games via speed. So what I want to do is use value plays like those guys in order to get up to the studs elsewhere in the lineup. And especially with Darvish being 10,000, you can get there for tonight. So Arizona, a team where you can stack them and get to the studs in the lineup, which is definitely how I want to play things for tonight. I do think the other side of the game is interesting too. The Cardinals likely facing Ryan Nelson. It has not been officially announced that Nelson will start this game for Arizona. So I would check back on that later to make sure it is in fact Nelson and not someone else. So feel free to ask me on Twitter if they change starters, and I can give you my opinion of that there. But I assume it will be Ryan Nelson. Nelson has had back-to-back really good starts, and he's now had 4 good starts in his past 5 outings. And all those, or the 4 good starts, all came on the road. So it might be dumb to keep stacking against Nelson, but I will. Let's look at those 5 starts and kind of dig into those specifically. Nelson's pitch mix in those pretty similar to what it has been all year, and his velo is similar. So from a philosophical perspective and a stuff perspective, not a whole lot different, and the results have just been great. But the peripherals have been fine, more so than great. Even if we look at just the 5 games where Nelson has pitched really well, so cherry picking to make it look as good as possible, he has a 4.57 skill interactive ERA with a 42% hard hit rate and an 11.7% barrel rate. Last time out, Nelson let up 3 barrels against the Braves and somehow let up just 3 total hits. I think what he's doing is unsustainable. And the results should match the peripherals eventually. And it could wind up being here because the Cardinals have a 116 WRC plus against righties with a 184 ISO. So again, it's not a great park for hitting tonight. It is elevation, which helps, but not the temperature. But I do still think the Cardinals very much worth it. Now, the one thing that could change this is health, because a lot of guys for the Cardinals are banged up. Nolan Gorman, Wilson Contreras did not play Sunday. Lars Nootbaar left that game early. So you could still potentially stack them without those guys, and they'd be great for one-offs, but it would downgrade them for sure. Overall lineup quality could decrease a lot depending on what the Cardinals lineup looks like. So check it out. If they are super, super depleted, maybe reevaluate and look elsewhere. And again, check on the starter for Arizona too. But as of right now, I do think the Cardinals are a solid stack for tonight. Our third stack is not as good of an offense as Arizona or St. Louis. It's the Nationals, and it's rough, but they're in a great matchup today, and the weather is warm, so I do think they belong on the radar. They're facing the Rockies. It sounds like Carl Kaufman is going to be the bulk reliever for the Rockies after Bird, and I'm going to go based around that assumption because it does sound like it will be Kaufman. Kaufman spent some time in the big leagues earlier this year, got knocked around with a 10.19 ERA in 17 2/3 innings. And that's kind of in line with expectations based on what's happened with Kaufman so far in AAA. His ERA down there is 6.94 with a 5.78 xFIP. He got there because of a low strikeout rate and lots of hard contact. And that's the same thing we saw when he was in the majors. And some of those games were against non-elite offenses. This one is in Washington, so Kaufman does benefit because it's not a Coors Field. That's a big thing for him, but that's kind of the only positive here. I think we'll want to be on the Nats in this game, which has not happened often this year. So the Nationals, to me, the number 3 stack behind the Cardinals and the Diamondbacks. It really does seem like CJ Abrams is trending up here for the Nationals. Over the past month, his barrel rate is up to 7%. His strikeout rate is down 5 percentage points. And because of how fast he is, it's allowing him to hit for power, but of course also steal bases. Salary for Abrams is $3,000. I think he is easily worth that. And I will consider him for both stacks and one-offs, given that he does seem to have 1.5 sources of upside. I would say the power is still a half, but the speed is legitimate. So I think that's enough to make Abrams a quality play for tonight in DFS. Let's go now to things to watch. I do think you should consider Luis Castillo for tournaments. The Twins, very high strikeout matchup. Castillo just had 11 against them last week. His salary is $10,800. He's on the road, repeat matchup. No Byron Buxton for tonight. Sounds like he will be on the paternity list. So I think we should see people stay away from Castillo because of the repeat matchup and stuff like that. But I also think that's why he is a tournament pivot at best. I can't go beyond that because the repeat matchup does matter. The Twins being a good offense, that Buxton does matter too. So give him thought, but maybe don't need to force it for tonight. I've tried stacking against Graham Ashcraft recently, and I'm probably done for tonight. He's facing the Brewers, so not a great offense. And the ground ball rate for Ashcraft is still really good, and it's paired with good results. So I've seen enough where I'll hold off for a bit. Maybe we'll be back on Ashcraft later on, but for right now, I'm okay no longer stacking against him. Finally, Brandon Bielak is facing the Rangers, who have no Corey Seager, which is a bummer for their offense, but they still have a 114 at WRC plus against righties on the current active roster without him. Bielak's results are much better than his peripherals, so I'd be willing to use a couple of the Rangers as one-offs or maybe in a stack. I think that they are at least in consideration for that against Bielak for tonight. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls for the main slate. The boring one, revenge game. Paul Goldschmidt taking on Arizona. Feel like we got to go there. Facing a guy who has struggled with hard contact and fly balls, if it is in fact Nelson. So to me, we'll make Paul Goldschmidt the boring home run call for tonight. For the fun one, let's go Jeimer Candelario. He's actually had a really good year, hitting for good power against righties. 15 home runs so far. It seems like it's pretty legit as far as the against righties at least, what he's done. So I feel okay about it. So we'll go with Paul Goldschmidt and Jeimer Candelario as our dinger calls for tonight. Second consecutive podcast of the National being in the dinger calls after Lane Thomas is there. And he went deep in the first inning against Alex Wood back on Friday. So weirdly, back-to-back podcasts with the Nationals in the dinger calls. That is all that we have here for today on the Solo Shot. As mentioned, do not forget to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, on FanDuel as well, and on FanDuel TV+. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups, and we'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down Tuesday's slate. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.